This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, August 19th, 2021, and my guests are two wonderful people. I have Ryan Whitwam here of Android Police, and I have Nick Gray of Phandroid. Woohoo! Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I know it's quite the intro. So, okay, we're here to talk about a few things. This is Pixel 5a week. We all have our phones, right? Like, we can all show them.
I don't have mine on me.
You've already shunned it.
I know. Well, no, I mean, it's fine. I was using it last night. It's a fabulous phone.
And we're actually here for a Moto event in New York City. That's why we're here together. And we want to talk about this phone. It's actually, by the time you hear and see this podcast, this phone will be official. And we have a lot to say about it.
Yeah, we have things to say.
It's pretty sad, the things we have to say.
I don't think there's a lot to say. There are things to say, but...
Yeah. And then the other topics I want to talk about, there is the Realme GT Masters Edition. There's a couple of those to talk about. So those are weird because normally the Realme Masters Editions are always the same phone, just a special edition of it. But this time they actually created completely new phones. And one of them is actually very similar to the OnePlus Nord 2, which I have in my pocket right now and is freaking fantastic. I actually think, as an aside, maybe you guys will agree or not, I don't know. To me, this is better than OnePlus 9 right now.
I mean, like, objectively, I don't think it's a better phone, but I think it is a much better phone when you figure in how much it costs.
I think for me, it's about there's a bunch of factors here. The number one is OIS on the IMX 766. It's just a better camera. Just period. Like one micron pixel bin, right? Mm. Down to like 4:1. It's like immediately you're getting like a better experience. You're getting 2 micron pixels. And then the other thing is, the only thing that stops you really from getting like super excited about it is no wireless charging, which the 9 has. But if you look at the price difference, yeah, you get an 888 on the 9. But the reality for me, what really like kind of makes me happy with the Nord 2 is that I think you get a better camera, you get a much cheaper price, you get great performance, you lose wireless charging, but I feel that's what the 9 should have been. Like, I can accept that the Nord 2 has plastic frame, but the 9 has a plastic frame, which I think is unacceptable at that price.
I think it's...
At the price point of the OnePlus 9, you shouldn't be dealing with plastic at all. It should be all premium materials. Yeah. But my issue with the Nord comes down to simply availability. While it is a fantastic phone,
it's not a US model.
Yeah. But it's not a US model, but it's also not broadly available across Europe and Asia too. It's only select markets, which is kind of like the Pixel 5a. It's a great phone, but it's select markets. When I'm trying to compare phones, I was actually doing a Nord 2 versus Pixel 5a comparison. And when my comparison, I'm like, it really doesn't matter which phone is better because it only matters where you can actually buy this phone. Because if you're importing it, you're paying a premium $100, $150 premium tax just because you're importing and paying international shipping. So the value proposition completely goes out the window for either device if you're not within those markets, which is so insane because both of those phones are so good, right? And that's the limited market availability is really what kills it for both of those phones for me.
So the Master is not Masters, it's Master Edition Realme GT. There's 2 models, and one of them, the better one, is almost a dead ringer spec-wise for the Nord 2, but it has a Snapdragon 870 instead. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about that. Then we have the Redmi 10, $179 phone with no 5G, MediaTek Helio G88, which is the highest end, I think, of the Helios.
It's the highest end Helio.
And I want to say, it has a 50 megapixel camera of some kind. And then 5,000 milliamp hour battery and 120 hertz IPS panel for $179. We have to talk about that, especially after we have the whole conversation about Moto.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I know different markets, but I feel like the US market can't continue being so insular about this affordability when OnePlus is already eating Moto's lunch with phones like the N200 5G. And T-Mobile made the Revel V Plus 5G, which I'm holding right now, a $200 phone that kicks pretty good ass for what it costs, in my opinion. So you're so far using it. I want to talk about my Tesla Model 3 review that is now live on TechRadar. I'm writing car reviews, specifically EV and plug-in EVs for TechRadar going forward. So please be aware of that. And that's really all I have to say about that. Go read the review. It'll be in the show notes. And then Samsung Galaxy A52s 5G. They put the right chip in that thing finally. Like, can we talk about that just because we can get it out? We strike it out right now.
Yeah.
Take a Galaxy A52 5G with a Snapdragon 750G and put a Snapdragon 778G in there, and that's the new A52s.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't just release that phone. It's only been like a month and a half since the other one.
Yeah, it's been a month and a half.
Is it more
expensive? What was the price difference? I think there's a $50 price difference, so it takes it from a $499 phone to a $599 phone, which when you compare it specifically in the US market again to the Pixel 5a, which has the 765G, it's the performance differences between those chips are negligible at best. Like if you run benchmarks and you're using them day to day, you're not going to notice a difference. It might be about 5%. So I really don't know why they didn't do it out of the gate, but I think that price point is what they were trying to hit. They were trying to hit the $499 price point before. And for those who want just a little bit more, here's a slightly more expensive device. But is it coming to the U.S. market, or is it only available?
It's my understanding that it is
Korea
going to eventually.
Yeah, but I don't think U.S. carriers have picked it up yet.
No, I doubt that they will.
So it might only be unlocked through Samsung.com.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like that it should have been that chip, and I actually feel honestly that it should have been $500 for that chip. A little more aggressive.
This is Samsung. If they want to sell that phone for $499,
they can do it. They can do it. They
and
just
so
have to
why
cut into
go
their margins.
through this shenanigans?
Yeah,
but
I don't
the
know.
reality is you're here to get your news, and there is now a Samsung Galaxy A52s 5G. If you want that sweet spot of a little more performance, I think this is going to give it to you.
Yeah, and to connect that to Motorola yet again, that phone has 120 hertz OLED.
OLED.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we've covered two news items. Well, my Tesla Model 3 review was more an announcement, and then we have the Samsung. I also want to talk about the Z Fold 3 first impressions, especially the under-display camera. You wrote an article about this, and you have the phone with you here. So we are going to show you folks in the video, those that are watching on video, the actual, maybe you can show what you showed in the photos in your article.
Yeah, I don't know how I'll have to get like real close.
But yeah, it's ultra wide, so I think if you can get about a foot away from the camera, they'll see it. The point is, I see it already.
Yeah, it's like a little
it's
pixel
off
art.
center. You see it.
It's like a little pixel art stop sign. I'm gonna hold it up here, see if that shows up on the video.
You maybe go back and forth with the screen like that. Yeah, they might be able to see it better. Anyway, so folks, remember there is a video version of this podcast if you join the Patreon, right? So there you go. There's your reason. Patreon.com/TankGirl. Patreon.com/TNKGRL. Check it out. So, what's your take, like your first impression? You're reviewing this right now.
Yeah, I mean, so I actually own the Z Fold 2. I've used it a lot over the last year, and it's been one of my favorite phones. And this is better. So I guess this is also one of my favorite phones now.
So you were telling me last night the things you noticed the most are the difference in screen ruggedness, the inside screen.
So like on the Z Fold 2, the top layer of that screen was so soft you could dent it with your fingernail.
Yeah.
And even if you try to be careful with it, like it just picks up dings and scratches, and it's not like great long term. But this one, obviously I haven't had it that long, but it seems like it's a lot harder. Like you can feel it doesn't give as much when you press. And they also have this silly stylus that you can get for it. It comes in its own little leather case, which is unnecessary.
And the tip
retracts. Like here, like push on the tip. You will probably be surprised how much force it takes.
Wow, it's actually quite a bit of force.
Yeah,
more than I expected.
And when they explained this to me, I thought, it's gonna like flex like a fountain pen or something. But it takes like a lot of force. But I've been stabbing this thing, and it doesn't.
It's a couple pounds of force.
Yeah, and it doesn't damage the screen, which I think is fantastic. That's a big improvement over last year's phone.
Well, and they also have S Pen digitizer underneath the display as well, which adds a little of the rigidity to it.
Yeah, I mean, and so like this is the Fold Edition pen. They have like the full size, the fancy one that has like the Bluetooth stuff. This doesn't have any of that, so it doesn't need to charge. So it's just the inductive.
It's just passive, yeah.
But I mean, it's if all you really need to do is write on the Fold, like this thing works great. I mean, I've been really impressed with it feels just like using a Note on like a bigger screen.
So obviously we got a better chip in here, 888. We've got a 120 hertz front display now.
Yeah.
The cameras are pretty much a continuation of what they've always done. Triple 12 megapixel.
Yeah.
Pretty solid, but again, it's like Pixel. It's like you're going to get a very good set of results, but it's kind of stagnating a bit compared to the S21, right?
I mean, you can't take as many different kinds of photos just because you don't have really long reach.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a 3x, right?
It's 2.
Oh, it's only 2.
So I mean, it could be better. But I mean, I understand why they can't fit like a huge camera module.
You can't fit the periscope camera module in there.
But I honestly feel that the Z Fold and the Z Flip, the new ones and the old ones, that 12 megapixel triple set or double in case of the Z Flip is a pretty solid reference.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
The Pixel.
Well, I would say it's on par with what we got on the Galaxy S21.
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
Not the Ultra. And so, if you want the camera experience, this is not the phone for you. It
100%.
will still take really good photos, but the main selling point is going to be that foldable display. And the camera is more of an afterthought at this point. It's still good. It's just not amazing.
And I mean, I looked up the specs, and this is supposedly only 0.8 millimeters thinner than the last one, but it feels so much.
I think
better.
it's the slap sides.
I haven't held it yet. Mind if
go for it. Yeah, so it doesn't taper as much as.
Well, and I think the profile is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's when it's closed, it's almost flat. Like the last year's phone was triangular because it was so much thicker on the hinge side. But so this one, when I have it closed, it's something that I don't hate holding on to. I always felt like I was on the verge of dropping the Z2 Fold.
Yeah, it does feel substantially smaller. I think it has to do with the hinge and the profile of
it does have a giant, I think, kind of distracting millimeter wave window right there. It's like this big plastic insert.
Oh yeah,
which isn't the prettiest.
If you want 5G, here's a plastic insert on your phone.
Did last year's have that?
So last year's phone, this side was a little bit different. It kind of like dipped inward.
Oh, that's right.
So that there was, so that it could sort of like come over the corner.
Kind of wrap into it. I remember that now.
Yeah.
But you know, I like those slab sides. On
yeah, I
that
do too.
And on the flip, it's like this, you know, $200 Rebel phone. Like, I don't want to say the TCL version because it turns out it's not made by TCL, even though it's a dead ringer of the TCL 20 SE. But the TCL 20 SE is a 4G phone with a Snapdragon, I want to say 460, whereas this is a Dimensity 700. But this has the slab sides, as you can see in the video. The sides are flat.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by slab sides. Whereas the TCL 20 SE has a rounded, and the difference in hand feel immediately to me. It's like the difference between an iPhone 12 and an iPhone 11. And I am a big fan of flat sides on phones because that small edge you get that digs into your palm, it might not feel as comfortable,
it helps you
but
hold
it gives
the
you
phone.
good grip.
But you still, I mean, but like even if it's flat, like you still have a lot of area you can grip. Like I guess we're going to connect to Motorola again. The Edge phones they released last year, they were so curved on the side, like there's like nothing flat to hold on to. So your finger is really only coming in contact like a tiny bit of the phone.
I want the listeners to accumulate the times we mention the Moto, so that when we actually talk about the Moto, you can have all of that buffered
you'll be like,
in the back.
I already
of
know all of this.
No, it's important that you understand that we're making these notes because right now we have a lot to talk about this Moto phone that is really not that positive. And to understand why we're so negative about it, you have to understand all these things we're talking about right now. So maybe we should go on. Like, you've given us a quick view of what to expect with the Fold 3, and check out Ryan's review on Android Police sometime the next week or so.
Hopefully soon.
Right? And of course, we want to talk about the Pixel and the Moto. But I'm just making sure that we have. Let's maybe jump into these short items first, like the GT and the Redmi, and then we can talk Pixel, especially with Nick, because Nick, we both reviewed it on embargo, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, I put up my review.
I had my embargo reviewed on Hot Hardware, so check that out. So, okay, let's talk about the Redmi 10, because, oh my God, like, I'm just going to read you the specs as soon as this page loads. It's pretty crazy. So, as we mentioned, $179 gives you the entry level, right? 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage. It might not be the model you want. There's a 6 gigs version. to me 6 gigs is more what I would
I
use
think
for Android.
that's what you should have.
But if you're on a super tight budget and you want a phone that doesn't suck and will work in the US on probably most of the 4G bands, there are some 4G bands you're just not going to get, but that's fine. You're getting a 50 megapixel camera. I'm not sure what sensor they're using, but there's not that many out there right now. I don't think Samsung makes a 50 yet, do they?
No, but
Sony, right?
Sony has like 10 50 megapixel sensors, and they range from
like
really, really good to really, really horrible. So it's kind of
there's a horrible one? Which one?
50 megapixel sensors that they put out like 4 years ago that a lot of cameras
no, that's not what this would be. This is definitely a quad buyer pixel bin thing.
But they've been doing quad buyer pixel binning for...
Not for 50 megapixel.
I mean...
No, not for 50
I don't think that,
like,
Xiaomi would, choose to use a 4-year-old
This is definitely
sensor.
No, but for the price point of this phone, every time I hear a new phone coming out with a 48 megapixel sensor or a 50 megapixel sensor, and then I see the price point of the phone, my immediate response is, this is going to be garbage.
And
I don't
that's
care.
Probably
I don't care how many pixels you throw at it.
This
it's
is
going to
the
be
problem.
garbage. But people they see that number and they're like, oh my gosh, this is
but
amazing.
you're making the wrong assumption. We're talking about Xiaomi. And
no,
in my experience,
I'm not making the wrong assumption.
Okay.
Xiaomi has some really amazing smartphone cameras, but their budget-friendly devices aren't.
I disagree.
I
disagree 100%. I reviewed the Note 10 Pro Max, right? The Redmi. That's a $229 phone for Geekspin back in May. That phone has not only 120 hertz OLED panel, it's got a 108 megapixel Samsung HMX sensor, and you could just kind of like checkbox these things on a spec list and call it a day. But the software for that imaging is really refined. They took what they're doing on the Mi 11. Basically, I called it a Mi 11 on a budget. You're getting 80% of the Mi 11 experience on a phone that costs like a third of the price. And I would not be surprised if Mi 10 actually ends up having a relatively decent Sony sensor, recent one, and they have some decent image processing. Because when you go look at the other cameras, you immediately know they're saving money.
Well, the macro camera the depth
but it does
sensor
have an ultra wide, which a lot of phones at this price point don't
have the ultra wide.
So it's an 8 megapixel ultra wide,
which is pretty standard these days for these budget friendly devices. And the ultra wides aren't going to be good, but just having the option of the ultra wide, I would rather you not give me a zoom and not give 100%. Me a macro camera and give me an ultra wide because it's a different viewing experience.
Yeah, it's something you can't do that with a primary sensor.
Correct. And it just gives you a different perspective on the world.
I like when phones with ultra wides they have a high enough resolution to use that as like a super zoom macro. Like OnePlus phones, you can actually do really great macro shots on those phones without a dedicated macro camera.
Totally.
I don't think I've ever seen a macro camera, like a dedicated macro camera that actually takes good photos.
No.
Honestly, like to your point, no. But we used to have smartphones with their main sensors before we started getting 2 and 3 cameras that could actually focus. They weren't macro, but they could focus about 2 to 3 inches away, and you could take macro shots. And they don't do that anymore because of the depth of field and the focusing capabilities of the sensors. Yep. They don't do that anymore. They've switched over to the ultra wides, which is, in my opinion, a worse experience because those ultra wide cameras usually are inferior. Give me a macro with that main sensor, and then let's talk.
I think there's the other thing we have to talk about, too, is that there was a period of time where OnePlus and generally BBK Group was doing something very interesting that's completely gone, but I think is on the Moto, believe it or not. Actually, it's a plus point for the Moto. Is to put autofocus on the ultra-wide and let that become the macro. And I think OnePlus did start doing that with the 7T, and then they did it again with the 8 Pro, and I want to say the 7 Pro had it and the 7 had it as well. No, the 9 and the 9 Pro have it.
9 and the 9
Pro.
But
But there was like a time when a lot of OnePlus phones had this and a lot of BP group phones. And I think this is good to have. Like if you're going to do a macro, maybe you can't do it because of the depth of field on the main sensor. Put autofocus on the ultra wide, Anyway, but this Mi 10, look, not Mi 10, Redmi 10. The same day it was released, which was yesterday, they said, do you want to review? And I said, yeah, just simply because I want to see how good or bad is this. And I tell you, Nick, I think this is going to be a killer.
Yeah.
Every Redmi phone I've used so far in the last year and a half has been great. Before that, meh. But this last year and a half, I don't know what they're doing. And that's probably why they're number one. At least they were number one in June last month.
Yeah, and I think they're number one for a reason, and one of the main reasons is they just keep pushing out like how many Redmi phones have dropped
Yeah, I can't even keep
this
count.
year?
It's every 3 months.
It's well, not even every 3. It's like 3 per month.
Well, if you count,
like if you count all
the
the
Pocos,
variants and all the Pocos,
Yeah, like all of their
and
variants.
this is why they are number one. They're just flooding the market.
I mean,
For sure.
and the value is great. I mean, it's for us living in America, the value is like unbelievable. But even for people who live in these markets, I think the value is still
The
really
value
good.
is incredible, and that's where they're selling, and that's where their market penetration is in markets like India and China and a lot of Asian markets. My issue still comes down to I just can't buy it.
Yeah.
And
you can.
it's hard to recommend.
You're best in Alibaba and Amazon.
Well, see, I
You
would never
can.
really recommend that people like import a phone. Like
Amazon.
if you've got the option to like
As
buy
long
a
as the
perfectly good
bands
phone
work.
that works in this market, you know.
As long as the bands
Yeah,
work,
I mean, if
and
you're
for the most
comfortable with
part,
that.
for the most part, you can get away with 4G on T-Mobile with a lot of these phones. If you're not on T-Mobile, good luck. It used to be AT&T, and it had better band support, but that was 10 years ago for imported phones.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time recommending it to our readers in the US and Canada. But if you are over in Europe, you have full
100%.
support. I mean, you're not going to get 5G support, but you're going to have 4G support. And over in Europe, 4G gives you 200, 300 megs down, which is faster than 5G here in the US. So you're set.
So I can guarantee you this has a recent 50 megapixel sensor of some kind, probably a Sony, possibly a brand new one. That's a trickle-down economics of the higher end 50 megapixel sensors that they've been doing, like the 766, which is the Nord 2. That's what my gut feeling tells me. The highest, most costly SKU is 6 gig, 128 gigs for $219. 179 buys you 464. 199 buys you 128. And you're getting a 90 hertz Full HD, not 720p like this $200 phone from Timo. You're getting IPS, I'm pretty sure. And it's, it's 6.5 inches. Not bad.
Not bad.
Pretty decent size phone. Not too big, not too small. And you're getting Helio G88, and you're getting that 50 megapixel camera and 5,000 milliamp hour battery with 22.5 watt charging, which is not fantastic, but hey,
And for the price.
complain.
Well, and so one thing that we do have to remember is that, everyone's looking at the camera sensor and how good the camera sensor. You have to remember it's the camera sensor paired with the processor and what that processor can do. So keep that in mind. The Helio doesn't have amazing, like it does the AI computational photography and things like that, but it's not as good as, say, a Snapdragon 765G that has better algorithms built into it for image processing and video processing as well. So just keep that in mind. You can have a great sensor, but if it's not paired with the right processor, your results aren't going to be
But
perfect.
at the same time, this is $179. At that price point in the US,
At that price point, you're not going to find anything.
Oh yeah,
else that's good.
$180. If you spend that in the U.S., that phone is going to take potato photos.
We're in New York right now. I can spend $189 on dinner if I wanted to, and I would have nothing to show for it.
Exactly. So we're on the same page. So look, I'm getting one. At first I was like, oh, another, because I've got I've got the Poco M3. I've got a whole bunch of these like 100, just below $200 phones from China recently. And they were all really good. Like the Realme 7, the Realme 8, 5G even. And then now I'm like, okay, when I saw the specs, and especially that I'm really curious about that camera. Like, because my experience on these other Redmi phones, like the 108, what they managed to do with the 108, I could not believe it. I was like, I cannot believe this phone is $229 and it's giving me almost the same quality as the Mi 11. Now, it doesn't have OIS, so, in the light it was falling. It was a little fuzzier because you have opened the shutter longer and you get a little bit of motion. But I couldn't believe it. So if this thing at 50 megapixel kicks ass, good. And if it doesn't, then I'll say, yeah, it's just like a Poco M3 or whatever. It's fine, but nothing to write home about. So, and then this Realme GT Master edition is interesting because it is directly designed. In fact, PR people were like, could you please compare it to the Mi 11 Lite, please? Like they literally said, if you make a comparison video, we suggest you compare it. And I'm like, how the do you know that I have a Mi 11 Lite? I guess they pay attention to my stuff.
Well, I mean,
everybody's got a Mi
11. Everyone's got a Mi 11
It's such a
Lite.
good
They sent
phone.
it out to everybody.
It's such a great phone.
It is a great
I
phone.
love how thin it is.
I love the
the design.
The design of that phone. That's where for Xiaomi's main devices, their Mi 11s this year.
Yeah.
They just look like they have kind of the same design approach as what we've seen from other brands, but they look completely unique and distinct.
Yeah.
Which for a Chinese brand isn't that often that you come across a brand that can actually stand out from a design standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, a company that was known for basically copying
ripping
Apple
off
for
Apple
years.
for years. Yeah.
And so here's what I think is really cool about the Mi 11 Lite is that it has a Snapdragon. It has the rarest unicorns of Snapdragon. It has the 780G, which is like a 778G essentially, but at 5 nanometers instead of 6 nanometer, which means it's a ton more expensive to manufacture and just a smidgen, slightly more efficient. And
if it is at all. It's so...
But I love having a phone that maybe 3 phones in the world have that processor right now. So they want me to compare that because, rightfully so, the Realme GT Master Edition has a 778G, which is the closest thing. And it has, I'm going to actually go dive into this and tell you, the thing that's really cool, have you guys seen the Realme GT 5G? Their pseudo flagship, affordable flagship.
Yes.
It's got that yellow and black
yellow band
finish. Like it's vegan leather. So I have that one. We unboxed it actually last time I was in New York with Michael Fisher and David Kogan. We did a podcast and we unboxed it live on the show. That phone is, they do a lot of vegan leather, like the BBK group does. Because remember the Find X2 Pro last year, and there's a few others. So this Realme GT Master Edition also has a like leather, whatever, vinyl, whatever you want to call it, vegan leather back. But it's got these cool bumps on it. It's like hard.
It's textured. It looks modular. It kind of looks like Google's modular phones.
It looks like one of those like Pelican cases.
Yeah. It looks like it has a case on it, basically. You're totally right. And so that's kind of the shtick. That's why they're competing with Mi 11 Lite. It's about fashion. It's light. It's thin. It's sexy.
That's not the one they sent to me, though.
They sent you the Explorer.
They sent me the Explorer,
which is the Snapdragon 870 model, which is better because it's like the Nord 2. It's a Nord 2 clone. It has OIS on a 766, an IMX 766. I don't know which one they sent me. They said they sent me the.
Well, they're supposed to send out both, but they sent out the Explorer first, and said the other one will be coming after.
I think they sent me just the Masters. It's at DHL in San Francisco if somebody wants to do a heist. Anyway, please don't. This is Andy Boxall's great article at Digital Trends. I'll link it in the show notes. So the Master Edition has 655-inch 120Hz AMOLED. Oh, wait, that's the Explorer. Sorry. That's an AMOLED 120Hz with a Snapdragon 870, 8 gigs of RAM, 12 gigs of RAM, 4,500 milliamp hour battery, stereo speakers, 50 megapixel main camera with OIS. That's the 766. 16 megapixel wide angle. Ooh, that's like pixel worthy. By the way, we're recording this on the wide angle on the Pixel 4a5G. Then we have macro, blah, 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 selfie camera 32. Who cares? Okay. So the GT Master Edition, the one I'm getting with the bumpy leather, 6.43-inch Super AMOLED 120. Nice. 778G, 8 gigs of RAM, Android 11, 4,300 milliamp hour battery. Oh, both of them have Super Dart, or whatever it's called, a Mega Dart, or the 65 watt.
65 watt charging.
Completely compatible with OnePlus and Oppo, by the way. Vivo, however, this is something a lot of people don't know. Vivo, also part of BBK Group, but a little detached, has their own fast charging that's not compatible. What the hell?
It's like Vivo decided, like 2 years ago, to wake up and say, nah, we don't want to be part of the mothership anymore. We're just going to go off on our own. We're going to do kind of the same thing. No, it actually is the same thing, but it's not compatible at all.
So anyway, I'm getting one. You got the other one. You're getting both. I'm supposed to get both. I don't know. I'm sure I check. They only offered me the Master, so I was like, sure, I'll take the bumpy vegan leather bag thing. And it sounds good. And they clearly want me to compare it to the Mi 11 Lite that I have somehow.
I think these will both be good phones.
For sure. The pricing.
I'm excited about because the value proposition for them within the mid-range segment. We were talking about the other phone earlier being a budget-friendly device, that $200 price range.
Yeah.
I just don't get excited about phones within that price range. They offer great value for somebody, but it's not something that I would ever use for more than
same with me.
a week to review. But honestly, I've been using more and more mid-range devices within this category for longer periods of time. I've got flagship devices, up the wazoo, and these mid-range devices, mainly because they take really good photos and the batteries last forever. You cannot kill these phones in a single day. Whereas anything with the Snapdragon 888, you're reaching for a charger by the end of the night. I can go seriously 2 days on any of these mid-range phones, and I don't have to think about it. And it's not like, yes, performance is going to be different if I'm doing specific tasks, but if I'm just using my phone to check Twitter and answer emails and stuff like that, there's no reason why you would need anything more powerful than these mid-range devices these days.
So I don't want to jump too far ahead. How do you guys feel about the battery life of the 5A?
I think it's fantastic. I was blown away.
Yeah. All right. So Ryan reviewed it for us, and he thought it was really great. And so we've concocted this scheme now where he's going on vacation in a week or two, and he's only allowed to be on vacation as long as the 5A can remain charged. So.
Is he using it or not? Because
his rationale is like he's on vacation, so he's not going to use it a lot, and he can put it in power saver mode. So like if it lasts 4 days, his vacation is 4 days. If it lasts 8 days, his vacation is 8 days. And he's going to write a thing about it on the site that I think is going to be really fun.
I think that's a unique perspective. So I did my review, and I had 7 days with the phone before my review went up. In those 7 days, I was only able to cycle the battery 4 times. And that was trying to use it as much as possible, going out, doing camera comparisons, doing benchmarks, running a whole bunch of things. I actually did within those 4 cycles was a full battery benchmark with that, just draining the battery as quickly as possible. And you can honestly, for years now, we've been talking about, these phones can last you 2 days. I'm like, no, this phone will last you 2 days. There's no question about that.
I agree.
Yeah, I basically only had time to use that phone for 1 charge cycle, which is 2 days.
2 days, and you were probably using it the full time, just testing it out. And imagine if you weren't just trying to
if it's not like a new phone that you're playing with, if it just sits in your pocket.
Imagine you buy this phone for your mom. 4 days later, she's like, now I gotta charge it, right? Yeah. And if you're only using the screen for a couple hours a day, it can last you 3, maybe 4 days at that.
Yeah, let's jump into the 5A in a second. I just want to get through the pricing on the Realme real quick so we know what to talk about. So the Master Edition, the cheaper one, $399 for 6 128, $449 for 8 256. As you can see, pretty competitively priced, very much like the Mi 11 Lite. The Explorer Master, the Snapdragon 870 version, the Nord 2 clone, is $499 and $549 for 8 and 12 gigs. 8 128, 12 256. That's pretty ballsy. Like the 12 256 for $549 with a Snapdragon 870 and a Sony IMX766 with OIS. Sign me the fuck up.
Yeah, I think the value proposition within this segment is really, really good. And I was really disappointed a couple years ago when all the flagship devices went from $650, $700 and jumped to $900. And I'm like, nobody wants to pay $900 for a smartphone. And we've seen that with the reports these last week. Samsung's sales of their flagship devices have gone down 2 years in a row, and their mid-range segment keeps selling more and more. And it's because of this. These phones offer an incredible experience, and you don't have to pay $900 for it. For the average person, this is the phone you should be buying. You shouldn't be looking at a flagship tier device. The average person doesn't need that.
And I think I want to point out also that the Nord 2 obviously has Dimensity 1200 from MediaTek, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the 870 is an interesting chip because I think that if you're right now looking at the best ROI, return for your investment, the 888 is not the way to go. The 870 is the way to go. And I think the reason the 870 is the way to go is because it's an 865 plus. So you get a ton of performance. It's way more efficient than the 888 in terms of battery life. Gaming-wise, it's just as fast.
But so here's the thing. Gaming-wise, it's actually better because the 888, it starts thermal throttling after about 10 minutes at peak performance. So if you run if you're playing any games, yeah, your first 5 minutes and 10 minutes are going to be
It
great.
depends on the phone.
It depends on the phone, but like
Most of them.
every single one. So I run a couple different benchmarks that do long-term throttling benchmarks to see how fast it throttles. And every 888 phone, the longest one that's lasted for me was the Galaxy S21 Ultra, lasting about 15 minutes before it was at a 70% throttle. And at that 70% throttle, it is 20% less performant than the 870. And so after that 15-minute mark, the 870 is the better
So
chipset.
there's only 2 phones I reviewed with an 888 this year that did not throttle under load more than 5%, which is pretty good. And that's the Mi 11 and the Red Magic 6R.
Well, that one's built specifically for gaming.
No,
So.
the Magic 6 is built specifically.
Yes, yeah, the 6R is the one that looks kind of like a regular phone.
The 6R does not have a fan.
But it still has better thermal systems on
Clearly
the outside
they've done
than
something very good
most
to it.
other
Yeah.
flagships.
It doesn't have a fan.
It doesn't have the
But
fan.
for a
No.
phone that doesn't have a fan as an 888, it should be cursed, and it's not.
It's not.
And the Mi 11, I don't know what they did to the Mi 11 cooling system, but it is so far the best I've tested. It's even better than Magic 6R. So, here you go. No, look, buy a Snapdragon 870. And again, we're going to talk about Moto next, but first 5A. But Moto has a phone that they released very quietly, did not want to provide us with review units about 2-3 weeks ago in the US, the Moto G100. So the Moto G100 it was released abroad as a global phone, primarily India, and then very quietly Moto announced it for the US, unlocked, with limited band support from their store and from Amazon. And when I asked for a review unit, they're like, we are not giving out review units.
I mean, that might just be like a weird supply chain thing. Like they just had, a bunch of extra capacity. And they're like, what do we do with these phones? I don't know, sell them in the US.
And so here's the thing. That phone, in my opinion, is better than the phone we're going to talk about next. Because the specs on that phone are just better. I mean, you don't get a 108 megapixel camera, but you get a 64 or something, and we know that with Moto is not going to make any difference whatsoever. So
the G100, it has 128 gigs of internal storage, 8 gigs of RAM, the Snapdragon 870, then the 5,000 milliamp hour battery, 6.7-inch display. It's full HD plus.
So it is
$90
$500 officially, right?
Is it
Am I
OLED
right?
or LCD?
It's LCD.
It's LCD, yeah.
So again,
it's Moto.
So it's an LCD, similar display, better chip, slightly worse camera, similar battery, and it's priced $200 less. And what the F? So let's get to the Moto in a second, but keep that in mind. The Moto G100 Snapdragon 870. I think that what the F is the fact that it doesn't have millimeter wave, which is, I don't even think it supports Verizon in the US, the G100.
That seems plausible.
Which is a weird thing to sell, unlocked, for Moto. Right, Nick?
I mean, it depends.
Anyways.
I mean...
So, Pixel 5a. Right? Pixel 5a.
It's a very good phone.
It's fantastic. I went into this thinking, with all the rumors, I was like, they're really, really not trying hard. They're doing a Pixel 4a 5G with a slightly bigger battery and a slightly bigger screen. That was the deal.
Yeah, but like that turns out to be pretty great though. NIP rating. It's like
NIP rating.
There's like
and the metal build. It turns out these are the only differences, and it turns out that those are actually very helpful things.
So, I was gonna say the same thing about the Pixel 4a 5G last year. I'm like, but then
so last year you had the Pixel 4a to choose from, and at that time most people didn't need to get the 5G version.
Correct.
But this year it's just that phone.
But now it's like, well, I actually fell in love with the 4a 5G last year after it came out, and after I reviewed it, like 3 months later, I'm like, this phone is underappreciated.
Yeah, can we all agree that the best Pixel last year was the 4a 5G?
Yes,
like
completely.
100%.
I think objectively the best phone, yes, but maybe not the best value, because like the regular 4A was like.
Yeah, but the regular 4A did not give you an ultra wide, and it was a small screen for a lot of people that doesn't work.
A lot of people do like small screens, though.
Yeah, so I would say the price difference made the 4A
and that was like that was like an artificial price difference because Google was trying to undercut the iPhone SE.
Yeah, and so that was no one was expecting the $50 price decrease from the 3A to the 4A.
Yeah, I mean,
we went from $400 phone, and everyone liked the
$350,
3A at $400, and then it came out at $350, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, a $350 Pixel phone with a Pixel camera?
Yeah.
Like, why can't you not say no to that?
That's what my parents are using now, because
but
it makes sense.
The 4A is still available.
For the time being.
Until they run out.
Until they run out, and the 4A 5G. Until they run out. And on the last I checked on the Google store, they're sold out.
I thought they'd completely end the 4A 5G.
No, like it's listed. It's just out of stock, and it's still listed other places. Google never really stops selling a phone. They just sell out, and it just disappears.
We were told they expect stock to run out in the next few weeks.
Yeah. But I mean, that's how every smartphone goes. Like, it's not like we're stopping sales of a phone and they're just gonna dump.
So
objectively, into a river somewhere.
Objectively, based on the rumors, I was like, meh. And then when I actually got the official word from Google with the specs, I was like, okay, so bigger display, which is taller and narrower, which is the way you want to go bigger. You want to go you want to change the aspect ratio, which they did. They went from 19.5 to 9 to 20 to 9.
20 to 9.
And it feels it's actually narrower, slightly narrower than the 4A 5G, which it feels great in hand. It's also got a bigger battery, and that makes a huge difference, it turns out. And it has, the metal build is actually not a metal build. It's exactly like the Pixel 5. It's some sort of metal chassis with that resin on top. So I hate that they didn't actually explicitly say that in their press stuff, because they did say it with a Pixel 5, but there's this thing. I was expecting actual aluminum on the outside of this thing. It's not.
No, and I wasn't expecting it to be, but honestly, like, I could care less if it was or wasn't.
Right.
Like, I had no issues with the 4A 5G or the 4A.
You bullet point all this, and you add the water resistant, which I think a lot of people are happy with.
Yeah.
And you then look at the fact that they dropped the price $50, and objectively, this is, not a big effort, but a better phone. And then you start using it. And even though I use a Pixel almost every day, an older one, because I'd gone back from my OnePlus 8 Pro. I did not jump to the 9 Pro, which was my original intent, because then I've heard the rumors of the Pixel 6, and I'm like, I'm too lazy to switch phones. So I'm like, I'm going to pull out one of my old Pixels and continue using that for a while. And you use a Pixel, and everything just makes sense again. It's just like peace has been attained, Zen mastery is here, and other than wireless charging, if that phone had wireless charging, if the 5A had wireless, I was hoping for wireless charging and 90 Hz display. If that phone had delivered that, 100% that'd be the phone I'd be on right now.
Yeah, my 60 Hz display is a bit of a bummer.
Yeah,
it is a bummer, but here's the thing: if you've never used, like, if you are buying this phone, there's a good chance you've never used a 90 Hz display, and this is a good 60 Hz display.
Yeah, it's great.
And a lot of the IPS 90 Hz and even 120 Hz displays are worse than this 60 Hz. Like, you can actually, like, I don't know what they're doing with the drivers, the display drivers or something. They're just bad, even though they say they're refreshing at 90 or 100 Hz or 120 Hz. It's an experience that's inferior than what you get on an OLED that's a 60 Hz.
Look at it.
Yeah, and for me, the only disappointment with this phone is that there is no $350 version anymore. We had a Pixel 4A at $350, which I could recommend to anybody, now it's $450. That puts it at a 25%.
But look at everything else that's at that price point. Did you see the photo I posted on my Instagram where there's it's like a very shadowy shot of the Pixel in this case, and it casts a shadow on the table, and I wrote, "This is the Pixel 5A casting a shadow on every other mid-range phone," because I have reviewed every single one of those Moto Ace 5Gs. And of those, officially available in the US phones. No, I'm not talking about the Chinese phones that are amazing at that price. I'm talking about the officially available in the US phones. They're all pieces of compared to this.
So the only real competition this phone has is in the US, because it's only available in the US and Japan.
Yeah.
But in the US, the only real competition it has is the Samsung Galaxy A52.
Correct.
A52s now.
If that comes to the
we don't know.
Hopefully.
And so at that price point, this is $50 cheaper Google doesn't do that many discounts. Samsung does, so you could go either way on that. Roughly the same price, but objectively, the software experience, as you were saying,
camera,
the software experience is so much better than what Samsung delivers.
100%.
Updates on day one, anytime. You get security patches on day one. Then when you're taking photos with this phone compared to what you get on the Samsung device, it is night and day. I'm actually going through my camera comparison series this morning. That's why I was out this morning. I was out taking photos with 4 different phones, doing camera comparisons with this. And I've already compared it to the iPhone 12, and it's hit or miss. It could go either way when you look at those camera comparisons side by side with an iPhone 12. Doing a camera comparison with the S21 Ultra, in certain shots, this beats out the S21 Ultra in low light situations. Even with the ultra wide camera on this,
it's amazing.
In low light, and it's so incredible that you can buy a $450 smartphone and say, "Hey, this takes better pictures than your $1,200 smartphone."
Yeah. Pixels are amazing. If like your main use case for taking photos is I want to take the phone out of my pocket, take a picture, and have it look great.
Just be done.
Because pixels are great at that. If you're going to be like, okay, I want to frame this shot and like change the zoom and do all this other stuff, maybe like an S21 Ultra is what you want. But
the S21 Ultra is a lot more versatile.
Yeah, you got like multiple like optical zoom levels.
And the flaw with this phone is the same flaw we've had on all Pixel phones is video quality is meh. Forgettable. Yeah. It's not great.
As you can see. This is a 485G,
but it's the 485G. It's the same exact camera sensor and module.
Yeah, I mean, and that primary sensor is like how many years old is that now?
It's from the Pixel
3.
Yeah, it's
no, they changed
it. They changed it with it's the Pixel 3, but it's
different optics. The sensors might be the same.
The sensor's the same. It's a different.
Yeah, but I mean, it's impressive that Google's like post processing is so good that you can get these results out of a sensor like that.
I, unlike you, because I was really busy finishing my Tesla review for a deadline, I really only had 4 days with my Pixel 5a to write it under embargo. And I wrote 1,700 words plus, all the photos and all the content. And it was a marathon. And that phone, just the more I used it, the more it put a smile on my face. And I was like, objectively, this is not the phone for Miriam. Objectively, this is not the phone that I should get this excited about. But man, it is getting better every minute I use it. It is, and I feel that way about the 485G last year too. It is just a delight to use this phone. It doesn't stutter. Everything is fast enough. It takes great photos. Again, the only thing pissing me off is no wireless charging because I use it all the time. Not when I travel, but at home, in my car.
I could live without the wireless charging. What pisses me off is I love carrying a phone without a case, and this is just so bland. Like they give us all these fun colors with the cases. I'm like, this is a polycarbonate finish. You could put all these fun colors directly on the phone at no extra charge. Like you just need to put a little dye in there.
It's slightly like olive green.
Yes, I was going to say it's a weird color.
Yeah, so I put this next to the Pixel 5a, 5G, and the 4a from last year, and it has this green sage tint to it. It's slightly lighter. And there's this
Google
green,
just calls this black, like
mostly
black. Yeah, and I mean the accent color button.
I love like the scalloped
sage
button too.
It feels really nice. Well, and that's the thing. It's more of the same of what we've seen before, but there's slight hints of, hey, we actually spent some thought and time into making this a little bit different. But I mean, come on, if this phone was actually this color,
it'd be great.
That would be amazing. Yeah. Or give me a pink one or a purple one, something fun.
Or at least make fabric cases again. I'm sad there aren't any fabric cases for it.
Though they get so dirty. So
they do, but they look so cool.
So my daughter has a Pixel 3a as her main device, and she has the fabric case on it.
And it's nasty.
It is so nasty. Well,
they're washable.
It is, but at this point it's 2 years old, and it's like, this is... this case is going to hold up a lot better.
The fabric, if you wash it, if you surface wash it with like a soapy cloth or something, it works. But don't put it in the washing machine.
Soak it in a bowl with OxyClean.
Oh, that works. Yeah,
and the OxyClean will just clean it all up.
Magic. Yeah. There you go.
Without scrubbing.
You get your cleaning tips from the podcast.
Cleaning tips.
Look, you guys all listening and watching right now going like, let's talk about the Pixel 6 and 6 Pro when that comes out. And we're there. I'm there with you. That's the phone I'm eagerly waiting to replace, this aging Pixel I'm using to replace the OnePlus 8 Pro that I was using before to really get back into a flagship I feel 100% fits my feet, as it were. Yeah. But honestly, if you can't afford it or you need a phone right now and you're here in this market, the 5A, just have a look, because that phone just so much better than the sum of its parts. Like, I don't understand it, how, like, subjectively it's so magical.
I mean, maybe Google's just really optimized well for that chipset.
Well, I mean, they did.
Yeah,
it's the same
software,
one,
exactly.
right?
It's
765G's been out for a while. It's a solid chip, though.
Yeah, it's still fine, I think.
I think a lot of people are complaining that they should have. I'm like, are you nuts?
I mean, with the semiconductor shortage right now, it does not surprise me.
No.
Like Google barely was able to release this phone.
It's
like
only
two
sell
markets.
10 of these.
Well, and I think they had plans to release it, and then they realized, the Pixel 6 is going to be a much bigger deal. Let's not overshadow, the Pixel 6, because if you get this phone into too many markets, it's going to have other consequences for them as far as, making the Pixel 6 more or less appealing. The US market is so unique in the fact that we don't have that many good mid-range phones. There's a handful, but this will stand out here. This phone is not going to stand out in Europe.
Yeah,
it's not going to stand out
to
in
all
Asia.
the things we've been talking about.
But
it doesn't have the same value proposition.
But
as a lot of the other devices.
as much as that Redmi Note 10 Pro Max or whatever, the Max is the India version.
Those names.
The regular is the non-Max. But as much as that phone is incredibly great value, and I love the camera and I love the experience and everything, it doesn't come even close to a Pixel experience, in my opinion.
Oh no,
or OnePlus experience.
It's a different experience.
And
it's not
it's hard to sell
experience.
people on that though. You can't say, look, I know that on paper this phone doesn't look as good, but look, trust me, use it and it's way better.
But that's hard because you have to walk home with it and actually use it, which means you have to commit to paying for it first, right?
It's like, like the Pixel, like when you use the software on those phones, it's just, it doesn't get in my way ever. And when it does sort of like give me like a notification or some sort of hint or something, it always seems very well thought out. And, like it actually helps me use the phone better.
So let's transition. This is a good segue. Rick Ostolo, who's running Pixel division at Google, is clearly doing a good job. And I think that I was a little disappointed with the 5 past year, and the 4 definitely wasn't my bag. But I feel they've course corrected, and everything we're hearing from the 6 is very promising. However, he worked at Moto before, but he basically was at Moto. Then Moto got acquired by Google. He stayed with Google after Lenovo acquired Moto from Google. And what is up with Moto? Like, let's talk about this phone. I didn't think we were going to do this the last on the podcast, but here we are. Because it's a delicate thing to talk about. Here we are for this Moto event in New York, and yet this phone, when we saw it and got briefed, it just does not hit the spot. So let's go over it real quick.
Yeah.
What is it?
So this phone is basically almost identical to the mid-range Edge 20 that they announced for the international market
Correct.
2 weeks ago.
And it's completely different than the Edges from last year.
Yeah.
So the Edge Plus and the Edge detuned regular non-Plus were basically cut from similar cloth. They were flagships. The Edge Plus was unapologetically a flagship. It kicked every box. Like, it had wireless charging, it had OIS, it had a telephoto, it was amazing. And the only thing that missed out on that phone was that it was the Verizon exclusive. They should have sold an unlocked version. And I hate the fact, as an aside, that Moto always gets in bed with the carriers because it seems to corrupt everything, pollute everything they do. On top of that, they make bad decisions, which we're going to get to. So let's talk about the Edge Plus last year. Great. Then the Edge was like, let's take some of those features down. Take out wireless charging. Big mistake was take out OIS from the main camera. Even though it was detuned to 64, I would have stayed with OIS on the 64, but that's just me. And overall, the Edge was still made of metal. The plastic back and faux glass instead of glass back on the Edge Plus. But whatever, it still looked like an affordable, like a premium flagship type phone. Yeah. Wouldn't you agree, Nick? Mm-hmm. So this Edge, this 2021 Moto Edge, which is the same as the Edge, 20?
Yeah, the Edge 20. I think it's just the Edge 20 because like the
It
top
is
and bottom.
essentially, think of every Moto 1 you've played with, those mid-rangers, right? Plastic frame, plastic back, no wireless charging, kind of meh specs. That's
LCD screen.
That's what it is. And that's the kicker, the LCD screen. So the Edge last year, the marketing was all about the Edge screen, the waterfall display. And I'm not a fan of waterfall displays, right? Nobody is,
Neither.
right?
Yeah, no.
Though everyone in the comments seems to be
That's because
super engaged.
They
with,
look really
They
nice.
look amazing. You take a picture of an Edge screen phone and it's amazing. You hold it in your hand. It looks fine. The second you try to swipe on anything, you're like,
Yeah.
Edge detection is ruining my life right
Yeah.
now.
So, you're thinking they're making an Edge for this year. Well, no. Ask them why it's called an Edge, because it no longer has an Edge display. It no longer has a waterfall. And as Ryan said, insult to injury, it's not an OLED. It is got a massive chin, almost as bad as this phone here, which is a $200 phone from T-Mobile, which has the chin of all chins.
I would say it's about the same.
It's about the same, right?
Yeah, it's the first thing I noticed.
Granted,
phone.
we haven't held this phone in our hands yet. We've seen the pictures and videos of it. We're going to be seeing it in a couple hours. But, oh my, the issue for me really isn't what this phone offers, comes to the price point that they're selling it for. Because if this was going up directly against a Pixel 5a or a Galaxy A52, it would be a good alternative. The problem is the price
like
point
the G100. That's what I was saying.
The price point puts it in a completely different category, which it's not in. It's clearly a mid-range device at a weird price.
Let's build up to that, because I want to go through the spec sheet. So last year we got an AMOLED, curved AMOLED. That was why it was called Edge. This year there's no Edge, no curve, no AMOLED, and 144 hertz. Who needs 144 hertz if it's an IPS panel with a massive chin? Yeah. I would take a 90 hertz again OLED this year instead, or 120 hertz OLED like everyone else does at that price point. It seems like Samsung, like BBK Group and Xiaomi Group. Okay, but it gets worse. Okay, it's a 108 megapixel camera like last year's H Plus, but no OIS on it. It has no wireless charging. It has a big battery, 5,000 milliamp hour. What speed does it charge at?
30.
30. Okay?
Though the 30 is a lot better than the 18 of the Pixel 5.
You know, it's...
right?
I don't know why...
But we get price.
We're
going to get to the
charging
price.
speeds in the US. What is up with that?
Samsung's phones are still charging at 25.
Yeah, 25 watts. Yeah, so, this $1,800 phone charges at 25 watts.
I can't complain about 30 watts for a phone in the US because that's actually faster than most.
Okay, so then you look at... You look at the build. It's all plastic. And the best part is Moto claims that the frame inside is metal. Every phone has a metal frame inside. That's not the point. The point is we want the frame to extend to the edges, to the rail, so it feels premium, like the Edge and Edge Plus last year. This is all plastic. And it gets even worse, because, we're not done yet. No, we're not done yet. Okay, so the other problem that the next camera up the food chain, or down the food chain, is an 8 megapixel ultra wide.
Yeah.
8. Now they say they have autofocus on it so it can use macro shots.
I mean, that's nice, but the 8 is not high enough.
It's not high enough.
As we were talking about before, 8 megapixels is what we've seen on budget-friendly devices, $200 phones that have an ultra-wide camera.
Yeah.
Usually, if we're looking in the mid-range segment, we're looking at a 16 megapixel sensor, one that's actually larger, its overall footprint with those extra pixels. I don't know what the chipset or the sensor is itself, but maybe the pixels are larger and it will have better low light performance, because that's really where a lot of ultra-wide cameras really suffer, is in low light. I was trying to take pictures last night of this great view that we have out the window, and some of the cameras I'm comparing it to stick it to that ultra wide, and you're like, oh, don't want to do that. It's too dark for that.
Yeah. So now that you've heard the specs, what would you guess this phone could cost? Because we talked about the G100, which is very similar, right? Instead of a 108, it has a 64. It has all plastic build. It has an LCD that's 120 hertz. It has a Snapdragon, a better chip. It has a Snapdragon 870 versus a 778 on the new Edge. And why do they call it Edge, by the way? Moto PR says because it's a leading edge device. It is a
Marketing terms.
So
Marketing terms only.
They turned that around in there. But okay, so you're looking at all this and you're like, okay, if this phone was $500 for the US,
yeah,
maybe.
I would say, $450, $500, this would be a competitive device.
Right. And remember, Edge Plus last year, $1,000. Edge last year, $700, discounted to $500 at times. Okay. So, $500, right? Everybody agrees?
That would be nice.
Well, $500 at launch.
It is $500 at launch, isn't
with
it?
a $200 discount.
So it's a $700 phone.
Which
and
makes
what's going to happen
insane.
is they're going to like do this limited time sale, and it's going to go up to $700. Nobody's going to buy it, and they're going to drop it to $500.
And then it's the holiday season, and then they're like, well, for the holidays, we're dropping the phone. But Motorola does this. I don't know if you guys get their emails from Motorola.com about their sales every week.
Yeah.
They literally run sales every week on all of their phones. They're like, the Razor's on $100 off again. And
I
phone's $100 off.
I feel like there are kinds of retail where that kind of thing works because people really want to get deals. But that's like for stuff that people shop for on a regular basis. People usually buy a phone and then they
keep it
don't
for
buy
forever.
it for another one for a while. And somebody who wants to find out which phone to get, they do their research and they look and see what people like, and then they look at what the prices are, and they don't always know what the sale price is right this minute. They think, oh, this is a $700 phone, I'm not going to buy that. But if they actually went to Motorola, they'd say, oh, it's only $500 right now. But they don't know that.
They don't know that.
So I've been thinking ever since this briefing, and again, we're going to see the phone this afternoon, as Nick said. We saw the photos. We've talked about the specs. Again, we just said for the Pixel 5a, sometimes using the phone makes a big difference, and then you notice something's really great about it. But my past experience with Moto phone doesn't tell me that. And also, I think they're setting themselves up for disappointment because they're calling this an edge. If they had sold this phone, first of all, at a lower price point, even $550, right, out of the box, and with a discount to $450 or something, and then call it something else. Call it the G200, or the G20, or whatever.
That's the kind of thing that matters a lot to us. I don't think regular people are that concerned.
This is the audience. They're phone geeks listening and watching right now. We are hearing Edge, and we think this is going to be the flagship to replace last year's flagship.
But when was the last time a phone geek bought a Motorola phone?
Well, some of them were tempted last year because Moto made a real flagship for once.
They were tempted, but then once they actually looked at it, they're like, no, that's
they
not
didn't.
for me.
That's not why they didn't buy it, because it was Verizon only. They didn't buy it.
There's 100 million Verizon customers, so they should have sold.
Most of the tech geeks are not Verizon customers. They're T-Mobile customers. We all know that. It depends on where they live, mostly. But I think that if you want the best bang for your buck and the best 5G coverage right now, it's T-Mobile.
Yeah, but that's a whole different discussion about carrier selection and, as you said, where you live.
I'm just feeling that
people stay with carriers for years. They're not always looking for the best deals.
The enthusiast community is the T-Mobile community, by and large. That's what I really seem to get from talking to people.
I mean, I feel like most people I know in this industry use T-Mobile.
There you go.
But also most of the people I know in this industry live in cities.
Yeah.
So
if you live outside of 30 minutes outside of a city, T-Mobile might not be your best bet.
100%. But if you're an enthusiast and you mostly use T-Mobile and you're looking at this Edge Plus last year, immediately you're like, I can't buy this. It's on Verizon only, so you don't buy it. So it eliminates
you used to be able to do that, but then Verizon changed their unlocking policy, which is
they used to not have an unlocking policy, and all their 4G LTE phones were all SIM unlocked out of the box.
Yeah, that was a wonderful time to be a phone nerd.
For me, I've been thinking about this. Why am I so annoyed with this? Well, I'm annoyed with this because they positioned it by the naming as a flagship replacement for last year when it isn't. And they also are pricing it too high for what it is. And so if they fix those two things, I think there's nothing wrong with that phone per se. I still question the choice of going IPS at 140 hertz, 44 hertz versus going AMOLED at 90 or 120. For a phone in that price range, it seems a little off. I think the 108 megapixel is a good choice. The lack of OIS is arguable. Obviously, the OnePlus 9 made a tragic mistake by not putting OIS on its main sensor when the Nord 2 has it. I thought for sure the Nord 2 was going to drop it too, but nope. Anyway, I just can't wrap my head around the fact that they say their focus groups are telling them this phone is the sweet spot. I don't think that's true. I also don't think they're truthful when they say that they sold really well with the Edge last year. and the Edge Plus.
Yes, I've never
I
seen
don't
one in
think
real life.
that's possible. I've never seen an Edge or an Edge Plus in the wild, ever. And I live in a big urban place.
Yeah, I do have to give Moto credit for offering
Millimeter wave 5G.
millimeter wave
It does
5G.
have millimeter wave 5G. Sorry.
The Moto does deserve credit for stepping into a segment that they really haven't been in before, because last year they were at the high end and they're at the low end, the sub $400 smartphones. They haven't had a phone within this range. I think they're just shooting slightly higher than where they should be for the price point. If you can buy this phone for $500, it should be a good alternative to a Pixel 5a or a Galaxy A52. If you cannot get in at that early bird price point, then no, don't buy it. It's one of those things where you see so many great phones. Like, personally, I would never buy a Fold because it's just way too expensive. What is $1,800, right?
$1,800, yeah.
But if it goes on sale and it's $1,300, I'm like, at $1,300, maybe I could justify it.
The thing that makes that easier,
the price
though.
makes the phone for me, and within a budget-friendly segment, there are, like, even in the US where we don't have a whole lot of options of great mid-range devices. I mean, you're better off buying a Pixel 5 from last year than this new Moto Edge.
I feel that's
a $700 phone.
I haven't touched this phone yet, so hold on. But I'm right now in the camp of do not buy this phone. Period. At all. Like, this is not a.
Look, at $500, I feel like it's reasonable, but it's not the phone I would recommend if you were going to spend $500.
No, it's not one I would recommend. But if someone's looking at three options and they feel personally that this is the one,
there are people who just like Motorola.
Yeah. Like, I'll tell you what,
there are a lot of Motorola fans out there.
If you want a phone right now, and you want a phone that has similar specs and a similar price, buy OnePlus 9. You don't get millimeter wave. Maybe you don't care. I don't think anybody should care. But you get a way better display, and you still don't get OIS on the main camera, but you get a great main camera. And it's a OnePlus. The software is going to be great too. So I don't know. To me, like, it doesn't need to exist. If it was $500, whole different ball. And it is, I suppose, for 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, we should wrap it up. But any final thoughts on the Moto?
I'm excited to hold it in my hand because, as we talked about, our opinions could change, but based off of the specs and the price point, it's hard to recommend. When they announced this event and having us come to New York for this launch, I was hoping that it would be something noteworthy and worthwhile. At this point, I'm not excited, as none of us are.
Yeah, I'm not really excited either. I mean, I was hoping back when they announced the Edge 20 phones that they said one Edge phone is coming to the US.
There's a Pro, right?
Yeah, I was hoping that it was
Pro.
going to be the high end that came to the US, but it's not. So, yeah, it's disappointing. It's not very exciting. I mean, it's possible that maybe when we get the phone, and it'll be a lot nicer when we actually have it in our hand. But based on my experience with recent Motorola phones, I'm not thinking that's going to happen.
Neither am I. So, Ryan, let's start with you. You want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, like your social media handles and all that?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Ryan Whitwam. I write for Android Police pretty frequently. I'm also on Extreme Tech and The Wirecutter all the time.
Woohoo! Nick?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nick M. Gray, Gray, or find my videos on youtube.com/Phandroid or Phandroid.com.
There you go, folks. And I'm at Tankgirl on Twitter and Instagram. That's TNKGRL, like Tank Girl, the comic book character. Just drop the vowels. And if you want to chat with us about this, Twitter's a place to go. Tell us how you feel about this Moto Edge on Twitter. And my Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phone and pretty pictures taken with phones, of course, like the Pixel 5a most recently. And there's 2 YouTube channels you should subscribe to. YouTube.com/Mobile Tech Podcast is the main channel where you'll see my hands-on video of the Moto Edge and my unboxing of the Pixel 5a as well this week. I'll link all these in the description below. And this is basically the main channel. Then there is youtube.com/mobiletechmore. It's a channel my producer and I are trying to kind of develop. There's going to be all the peripheral stuff like travel tech, car tech, home automation, gadgets, things that don't, fall squarely into the phone and immediate accessory ecosystem. So subscribe, tell your friends, like the videos, all that good stuff. And we'll see you there on YouTube. Then the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. It's on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. Please subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff as well. There is a RSS feed there at that URL, mobiletechpodcast.com. And if your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. And for those of you who are wondering how to watch this podcast unedited on video the day before, generally 2 days before it's released as an audio podcast, Patreon is there for you. Patreon.com/TankGirl. That's Patreon.com/TNKGRL. There is a bunch of tiers. One of them is for the Discord server. One of them is for this video that is exclusive. So please join. Consider helping out through Patreon. Patreon.com/TankGirl. And I don't have anyone to thank this week for joining, but, maybe next week. Also, there's another way you can donate and help, and that's through the PayPal link in the show notes. So click through there, make a donation through PayPal, and we'd appreciate it. And I want to thank, of course, Audible, our sponsor. They've been our sponsor for years, and they're wonderful. If you like reading as much as I do, consider joining Audible. audibletrial.com/mobiletech is the URL. It gets you a 30-day free trial, and you get to keep a book at the end if you decide to not stay. But I think you will stay because, frankly, Audible is awesome. We use it on road trips because it's great to listen to books while you drive. I think if you're a delivery driver, for example, you deliver things all day and you need to keep your eyes on the road, this is another great option to basically read, in quotes, a book by listening to it. So consider Audible. audibletrial.com/mobiletech is the URL for that special deal. They have a great selection of books. Some of them are read by the authors. Some of them are these epic long things, just like a real book. You need to put it aside and, read it later and in 2 hours at a time sort of deal. They have podcasts, they have other content as well. So check that out. audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And again, I want to thank Audible for being our longtime sponsor. And of course, I want to thank Ryan and Nick for being my guests. Thanks, guys.
No problem.
My pleasure.
We'll have you guys on again at some point soon. And folks, we'll have another show next week, of course, for sure. So stay tuned for that. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.